The parchment envelope slipped under the door of Isadora Benedetti's small apartment at 7 in the morning on a gray Tuesday, like a message from destiny disguised as ordinary mail. "What the hell?" she murmured, adjusting her crooked glasses on her nose as she bent down to pick up the mysterious invitation. Her brown hair was in a messy bun, typical of someone who had just woken up, and her unicorn pajamas didn't match at all with the elegance of the envelope sealed with golden wax. With trembling fingers, she opened the seal and unfolded the paper that seemed to cost more than her monthly salary as a librarian. The handwriting was impeccable, almost regal. "Miss Isadora Benedetti is cordially invited to dinner at Ashworth Manor this Saturday at 8 p.m. Dress code, formal attire. Please confirm attendance by Thursday. The Ashworth family." "Ashworth!" she screamed, causing her cat Napoleon to jump off the couch in alarm. "The Ashworths, those Ashworths from the gossip magazines." Isadora ran to the bathroom mirror as if she needed to confirm she was still herself. Yes, she was still the same 28-year-old woman with freckles on her nose who tripped over her own feet and whose biggest social adventure of the month was the book club at the library. "Napoleon, are you seeing this?" She showed the invitation to the orange cat, who looked at her with that feline expression of supreme disdain. "Why the hell would the richest family in Boston invite me to dinner? They don't even know I exist." Really, it made no sense whatsoever. The Ashworths were practically local royalty, owners of half the businesses in the city, with a mansion that appeared in architectural documentaries and a son who was always on magazine covers as one of the country's most eligible bachelors, Theodore Ashworth. Just thinking the name made Isadora feel butterflies in her stomach. Not that she was obsessed with him like half the single women in Boston, but, well, maybe she was a little bit. He was annoyingly handsome, the kind of masculine beauty that seemed sculpted by a Renaissance artist on one of his most inspired days. It must be a mistake, she told herself, but her hands kept trembling. Or a prank. Definitely a prank. But her name was right there, written with all the letters. Isadora Benedetti. There was no way to confuse it. The phone rang, making her almost jump to the ceiling. "Hello? Isa, did you see the news?" Her best friend Cordelia's shrill voice cut through the phone like a hurricane. Theodore Ashworth was photographed leaving a restaurant with that model. What's her name? Valentina something. "Cord, And then he was seen buying flowers. "Flowers, Isa. Do you think he's going to propose to her? My God, there goes the last decent bachelor in the city." "Cordelia." "What?" Isadora took a deep breath. "I received an invitation to dinner at his house." Absolute silence on the other end of the line. Then a noise that sounded like someone choking on coffee. "Say that slowly because I think I'm having auditory hallucinations." "An invitation. For dinner. At Ashworth Manor. Next Saturday." "You're lying." "I have the invitation in my hand." "Photo, send a photo now." Isadora photographed the invitation and sent it. Seconds later, her phone almost exploded with the return call. "Holy cow, Isa, this is real. You've been chosen. Selected. It's like Cinderella, but in American version. Or it's a very elaborate prank. Don't be pessimistic. Maybe he saw you at the library and fell madly in love. Maybe you're his secret love. Maybe he doesn't even know I exist, and this is all a giant misunderstanding that's going to end with me being humiliated in front of all of Boston's elite. That possibility also exists." Isadora sighed and threw herself on the couch, hugging a pillow. "What do I do, Cord? I don't have clothes for this. I don't know how to behave at this kind of event. I'm going to make a fool of myself. First, you're going to confirm attendance because opportunities like this happen once in a lifetime. Second, we're going to transform you into a princess by Saturday. Third, you're going to slay them all. And if it's a prank, then you'll slay at the prank and leave there with your head held high. But what if it's not, Isa? What if it's real? What if this is your chance to finally get out of this monotonous little life and live a real adventure?" Isadora looked out the apartment window at the gray Boston street and the ordinary people going by with their ordinary lives. When was the last time something exciting had happened to her? When was the last time she had felt her heart race like this? "Okay," she murmured. I'll confirm attendance. Yes! Cordelia screamed so loud that Napoleon ran out of the room. I can't wait to see Berenice's face when she finds out. Berenice. The former school classmate who was now married to a businessman and never missed an opportunity to rub everyone's face in how perfect her life was. Berenice, who always called Isadora poor thing and asked when she was going to make up her mind and find someone. You know what, Cord? I think you're right. I'm going to confirm attendance right now. After hanging up, Isadora stared at the invitation for long minutes. There was something there she couldn't decipher, a strange feeling that this letter was going to change her life forever. She didn't know if for better or worse, but it would definitely change it. With still trembling hands, she picked up the phone and dialed the number that was elegantly printed in the lower corner of the invitation. Ashworth Residence, answered a formal male voice. Hi. Hello. I would like to confirm attendance for Saturday's dinner. Isadora Benedetti. Perfect, miss. We expect you at 8 p.m. sharp. May I ask, why was I invited? I'm sorry, miss, but I don't have that information. Until Saturday. And he hung up. Isadora stared at the phone, then at the invitation, then at Napoleon, who had returned and was watching her with his golden eyes full of feline judgment. Well, Napoleon, she said, getting up with a determination she hadn't felt in years. Looks like your owner is going to be Cinderella for one night. I hope it doesn't all end at midnight. Or, what she didn't know was that Theodore Ashworth was, at that exact moment, across town, holding a photograph of her taken discreetly at the library, wondering if what he was about to do was genius or the cruelest thing he had ever done in his entire life. And that next Saturday would be a night that neither of them would ever forget. Absolutely not. Cordelia stood in the middle of Nordstrom's evening wear section, hands on her hips, staring at the black dress Isadora was holding. You look like you're going to a funeral, not to catch a billionaire. I'm not trying to catch anyone, Isadora protested, though her cheeks turned pink. I just want to survive the evening without embarrassing myself. Honey, surviving is not the goal here. The goal is to make Theodore Ashworth forget his own name when he sees you. It was Thursday afternoon, exactly 48 hours before the dinner that had completely turned Isadora's world upside down. Cordelia had taken the day off from her job at the marketing firm and dragged Isadora to downtown Boston's fanciest shopping district with the determination of a woman on a military mission. Try this one. Cordelia thrust a deep emerald dress into Isadora's arms. The fabric felt like liquid silk and the price tag made her dizzy. Cord, this costs more than my rent. That's what credit cards are for, darling. Besides, when you marry Theodore, you can pay me back with interest. I'm not marrying anyone. This is probably all a big mistake anyway. But even as she said it, Isadora couldn't help but imagine herself in the dress, walking into Ashworth Manor, Theodore's eyes widening as he saw her. Stop daydreaming and go try it on, Cordelia commanded, pushing her toward the fitting room. 20 minutes later, Isadora emerged feeling like a completely different person. The emerald dress hugged her curves perfectly, made her brown eyes sparkle, and somehow transformed her from ordinary librarian to mysterious goddess. Holy mother of pearls, Cordelia whispered, her hand flying to her chest. Isa, you look absolutely stunning. Even the sales associate, a sophisticated woman who had seen it all, nodded approvingly. That dress was made for you, dear. Isadora turned to look at herself in the three-way mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back. For the first time in her life, she felt beautiful. Really, truly beautiful. We're taking it, Cordelia announced before Isadora could protest. And shoes, and accessories. And we're booking you an appointment at that fancy salon on Newbury Street. Cord, I can't afford all this. Consider it an investment in your future. Trust me, this is going to pay off big time. 2 hours and several $100s later, they were sitting at a coffee shop surrounded by shopping bags going over the plan. Okay, so tomorrow morning you have your hair appointment at 10. Cordelia was reading from her phone where she'd made a detailed schedule. Then nails at noon, makeup trial at 2. Saturday you'll have the final makeup session at 5, which gives us plenty of time to get you dressed and to the manor by 8. What if I throw up from nerves? You won't. And if you do, you'll do it elegantly. Isadora laughed despite her anxiety. How does one throw up elegantly? Very quietly and with good posture. Meanwhile, across town in the executive office of Ashworth Industries, Theodore was having his own crisis. He stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Boston Harbor, a phone pressed to his ear, his jaw clenched with frustration. I don't care what excuse you have to make, Richard. Cancel the photographers, he said into the phone. This is private. But, sir, came the voice of his publicist, this could be exactly the image boost we need after the Valentina incident. A nice, quiet dinner with a respectable local girl. She's not a publicity stunt, Theodore snapped, then caught himself. Where had that come from? He barely knew Isadora Benedetti. He'd only seen her a handful of times at the library, always with her nose buried in a book, completely oblivious to the world around her. But something about her had captured his attention. Maybe it was the way she'd smile at something she was reading, or how she'd gently help elderly patrons find books, or that incident last month when she'd stood up to that rude businessman who was yelling at one of the teenage volunteers. Sir, are you still there? Just make sure everything is perfect for Saturday. And Richard, if I see a single photographer anywhere near the manor, you're fired. After hanging up, Theodore loosened his tie and ran a hand through his dark hair. What was he doing? This whole plan seemed crueler by the minute. It had started as something else entirely. His mother had been pestering him about bringing someone appropriate to his grandmother's upcoming birthday party. Someone who wasn't a supermodel or an actress, or another one of the vapid socialites who threw themselves at him. Find a nice, normal girl, Theodore, his mother had said. Someone with substance. When his assistant mentioned seeing him at the library regularly, it had seemed like fate. A quiet librarian would be perfect for family events. Intelligent, respectable, unlikely to cause drama or sell stories to the tabloids. But then his younger brother Marcus had made that snide comment about the poor little mouse never having experienced real luxury, and somehow it had turned into this elaborate dinner invitation. A way to bring her into their world, show her what she was missing, maybe offer her a mutually beneficial arrangement. Now staring out at the gray Boston skyline, Theodore felt sick to his stomach. What had seemed like a clever idea was starting to feel like emotional manipulation of an innocent woman who had done nothing to deserve it. His phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Can't wait to meet your little charity case tomorrow night. This should be entertaining. Theodore's hands clenched into fists. Maybe he should call it off. Maybe he should... Mr. Ashworth? His assistant's voice came through the intercom. Your mother is here to see you. Before he could respond, Eleanor Ashworth swept into his office like a force of nature. At 55, she was still a beautiful woman with silver hair and piercing blue eyes that missed nothing. Theodore, darling, she said, air-kissing his cheek. I hear you've finally invited someone special to dinner. It's not what you think, Mother. Oh, and what do I think? Theodore studied his mother's face. Eleanor Ashworth had built half the family's charitable empire and could read people like books. There was no point in lying to her. I think you know exactly what kind of person she is, and I think you know this isn't going to end well. Eleanor smiled, but there was something knowing in her expression. Sometimes, darling, the best things happen when we least expect them. Trust me, I have a good feeling about Saturday night. As his mother left, Theodore couldn't shake the feeling that he was walking into something much bigger than he'd planned, and that maybe, just maybe, he was the one who was about to be surprised. The Uber driver's eyes kept drifting to the rearview mirror as he navigated through Boston's exclusive Beacon Hill neighborhood. Isadora couldn't blame him. She barely recognized herself either. The woman in the emerald dress bore little resemblance to the messy-haired librarian who'd found that fateful invitation 3 days ago. Her brown hair fell in perfect waves past her shoulders. Her makeup was flawless. And the dress, God, the dress made her feel like she could conquer the world. You clean up nice, lady, the driver said with a grin. Big date tonight? Something like that, Isadora murmured, her stomach doing Olympic-level gymnastics as they turned onto the street where Ashworth Manor sat like a crown jewel among the historic mansions. "This is it," he announced, pulling up to iron gates that looked like they belonged in a fairy tale. "Good luck, Cinderella." If only he knew how accurate that comparison was. Ashworth Manor loomed before her, all Gothic revival architecture and intimidating grandeur. Warm light spilled from dozens of windows, and she could see elegant figures moving inside like characters in a movie she wasn't supposed to be watching. The massive front door opened before she could even ring the bell. "Miss Benedetti, I presume?" A distinguished man in a butler's uniform smiled warmly. "I'm James. The family is expecting you." "Thank you," she managed, her voice barely above a whisper. The foyer was more magnificent than any museum she'd ever visited. A crystal chandelier hung from a ceiling painted with cherubs, and a grand staircase curved upward like something from Gone with the Wind. "May I take your coat?" James asked. As she handed over her simple black coat, revealing the full glory of the emerald dress, she heard voices from what must be the drawing room. Her heart hammered against her ribs. "Isadora!" She turned to see a woman approaching, elegant, silver-haired, with kind blue eyes and the sort of natural grace that money couldn't buy. "I'm Eleanor Ashworth, Theodore's mother, and my dear, you look absolutely radiant." "Thank you, Mrs. Ashworth. I'm still not entirely sure why I'm here, but please call me Eleanor, and nonsense, you're here because you belong here." There was something knowing in the older woman's smile. "Come, let me introduce you to everyone." The drawing room was filled with about a dozen people, all impeccably dressed and radiating the sort of casual confidence that came with generational wealth. Conversations paused as Eleanor led her in. "Everyone, I'd like you to meet Isadora Benedetti. Isadora, this is my husband William, my younger son Marcus, and our dear friends the Harrisons, the Cabots." Names and faces blurred together as Isadora tried to remember everything Cordelia had taught her about formal introductions. But one face was conspicuously absent. "Theodore will be down shortly," Eleanor said as if reading her thoughts. "He's finishing up a business call." Marcus Ashworth stepped forward with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. He was handsome in the same way as Theodore, but there was something calculating in his expression. "So you're the mysterious librarian," he said, taking her hand. "Theodore's been quite secretive about you." Before Isadora could respond, the room seemed to shift. The conversations didn't stop exactly, but they became more subdued, and she could feel the attention in the room redirect like a compass finding magnetic north. Theodore had entered. He stood in the doorway for a moment, and Isadora felt her breath catch. She'd seen him in magazines, but in person, wearing a perfectly tailored black suit, he was devastating. His dark hair was slightly tousled, his steel-gray eyes were intense, and when those eyes found hers across the room, something electric passed between them. Something that made her forget where she was, who she was. Everything except the way he was looking at her like she was the only person in the room. "Sorry I'm late," he said, but his eyes never left hers as he crossed the room. "Business never sleeps." "Theodore, you remember Isadora," Eleanor said with obvious satisfaction. "How could I forget?" He took Isadora's hand, and she was surprised by how warm his was, how gentle his touch. "You look incredible." "Thank you," she managed, praying he couldn't feel how fast her pulse was racing. "Shall we go into dinner?" Eleanor announced, and the group began moving toward what Isadora assumed was the dining room. Theodore offered her his arm. "Nervous?" he asked quietly as they walked. "Terrified," she admitted honestly. "Good. That means you're alive." The dining room was a masterpiece of understated elegance. A table that could seat 20 was set for their intimate group, with more crystal and silverware than Isadora had ever seen outside of a restaurant. She found herself seated between Theodore and Mrs. Harrison, a kind woman, who immediately began telling her about her book club. As the first course was served, some sort of delicate soup that probably cost more than Isadora's weekly grocery budget, she began to relax slightly. The conversation flowed easily, covering books, travel, and current events. She found herself laughing at William Ashworth's dry humor and engaging in a spirited discussion about library funding with Mrs. Cabot. "You're doing beautifully," Theodore murmured during a lull in conversation, his voice low enough that only she could hear. "I haven't embarrassed myself yet, you mean?" "You could never embarrass yourself. You're the most genuine person in this room." There was something in his tone that made her look at him more carefully. He seemed conflicted, guilty. Before she could analyze it further, Marcus's voice cut across the table. "So, Isadora, Theodore tells us you work at the public library. How quaint." The way he said quaint made it sound like something vaguely distasteful. "I love my job," Isadora said evenly, though she felt heat rise in her cheeks. "There's something magical about connecting people with exactly the book they need." "Oh, I'm sure it's very fulfilling," Marcus continued, and she caught the slight smirk he exchanged with one of the other guests. "Tell me, what's the most exciting thing that's ever happened to you at work?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Isadora could feel Theodore tense beside her, could sense that this was some sort of test she didn't understand. "Well," she said, lifting her chin slightly. "Last month, a woman came in looking for information about starting her own business after her divorce. She was scared, broke, and convinced she wasn't smart enough. I spent 3 hours helping her find resources, and last week she came back to tell me she'd gotten a small business loan and was opening a bakery. She brought me cookies and said the library, and I, had changed her life." She paused, meeting Marcus's gaze directly. "I think that's pretty exciting, don't you?" The table had gone quiet and she realized everyone was looking at her. For a moment she panicked, thinking she'd said something wrong. Then Eleanor began to clap. "Beautifully said, my dear." The others joined in, and Isadora felt a warm glow that had nothing to do with the wine. But when she glanced at Theodore, she saw something in his expression that made her stomach flip. He looked like a man who had just realized he'd made a terrible mistake. After dinner, Eleanor suggested they move to the terrace for dessert and coffee. The October evening was crisp, but not cold, and the manor's gardens were illuminated by strings of fairy lights that turned the space into something from a dream. Isadora found herself standing by the stone balustrade, looking out over the perfectly manicured grounds, trying to process the surreal evening. She'd not only survived dinner with Boston's elite, she'd actually enjoyed it. Well, mostly. "Penny, for your thoughts?" She turned to find Theodore approaching with 2 cups of coffee, his jacket unbuttoned, looking more relaxed than he had all evening. "I was thinking this feels like a movie," she said, accepting the cup gratefully. "Any moment now, the director is going to yell cut, and I'll wake up in my apartment with Napoleon judging me for oversleeping." Theodore laughed, and the sound sent warmth spiraling through her chest. "Napoleon? My cat. He has very strong opinions about my life choices. Smart cat. What would he think about tonight?" Isadora considered this seriously. "He'd probably wonder why I'm not home opening a can of his fancy feast by now. Napoleon doesn't believe in fashionably late dinners. A cat of simple pleasures. The best kind." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, and Isadora found herself stealing glances at Theodore's profile. In the soft light he looked younger, less intimidating than the magazine photos that had graced every society page in the city. "Can I ask you something?" she said suddenly. "Anything. Why am I really here, Theodore?" The question hung between them like a challenge. She watched as several emotions flickered across his face: surprise, guilt, something that might have been pain. "I mean," she continued when he didn't answer immediately, "your family is lovely and dinner was incredible, but I'm not naive. People like you don't invite people like me to intimate family dinners without a reason." Theodore set down his coffee cup and turned to face her fully. For a moment she thought he was going to tell her the truth, whatever that was. Instead, he said, "Maybe I wanted to get to know the woman who recommended Pride and Prejudice to Mrs. Henderson when she was going through her divorce." Isadora blinked. "You know about that?" I was there that day. You spent 20 minutes explaining why Elizabeth Bennet was exactly what she needed to read, and you were right. She told me later it helped her remember her own worth. You've talked to Mrs. Henderson about me? I talked to Mrs. Henderson about a lot of things. She's become quite fond of you. Theodore stepped closer, and Isadora caught a hint of his cologne, something expensive and woodsy that made her want to lean into him. She says you have a gift for knowing exactly what people need to read. It's not a gift. I listen, really listen. Most people tell you what they need if you pay attention. And what do you think I need to read? The question was asked lightly, but there was something intense in his gray eyes that made her pulse quicken. She studied his face, the strong jaw, the way he held himself like he was carrying the weight of the world, the sadness that seemed to lurk just beneath his polished surface. The Great Gatsby, she said finally. Gatsby? He seemed genuinely surprised. Why? Because it's about a man who built an entire persona to win something he thought he wanted, only to discover that the dream was never real in the first place. Theodore went very still. That's quite an assessment. I could be wrong, I don't really know you. No, he said quietly. You might be right. Before either of them could say more, Marcus appeared at the terrace doors. There you are, brother. Mother's looking for you. Something about showing Isadora the library. Of course, Theodore said, but Isadora noticed he didn't seem pleased by the interruption. Shall we? The Ashworth Library was a book lover's paradise. Floor-to-ceiling shelves filled with leather-bound volumes, comfortable reading chairs positioned near tall windows, and the sort of rolling ladder she'd only seen in movies. Oh my God, Isadora breathed, turning in a slow circle. This is incredible. It's been in the family for generations, Eleanor said proudly. William's great-grandfather was quite the collector. Some of these books are first editions, Isadora said, running her fingers reverently along the spines. Dickens, Austen, Twain. This collection must be worth more than most people make in a lifetime, Marcus said with that same smirk she was beginning to hate. Marcus, Eleanor's voice carried a warning. But Marcus wasn't done. It must be fascinating for you, Isadora, seeing how the other half lives. All this luxury, all this history, so different from your world. There was something cruel in his tone that made Isadora's skin crawl. She glanced around and realized the other guests had gathered in the doorway, watching like spectators at a tennis match. It is different, she said carefully. I imagine it must be tempting, Marcus continued, moving closer. All this wealth, all this privilege. A girl from your background must dream of this kind of life. Marcus, that's enough, Theodore said sharply, but his brother ignored him. I'm just curious about what our sweet little librarian hopes to gain from all this. Surely you don't think this is real. The words hit like a slap. Around them, the room had gone deadly quiet, and Isadora felt heat flood her cheeks as the implication of Marcus's words sank in. I don't understand, she said, though part of her was beginning to. Oh, come now. The mysterious invitation, the fancy dinner, my brother's sudden interest in a nobody from the public library. You must have wondered what the catch was. Marcus, Eleanor snapped, but the damage was done. Isadora looked from Marcus to Theodore, searching his face for denial, for outrage, for anything that would tell her Marcus was lying. Instead, she saw guilt written across his features like a confession. It's true, isn't it? She whispered. This was all some kind of, what, joke? Experiment? Isadora, let me explain. Theodore started, but she was already backing toward the door. I need to go. Please don't. I need to go now. She pushed past the shocked guests, through the drawing room, past James, who tried to offer her coat, and out into the cold October night. Behind her, she could hear Theodore calling her name, but she didn't stop. The fairy lights that had seemed magical an hour ago now felt like mockery. The beautiful dress that had made her feel like a princess now felt like a costume. Everything felt like a lie. She was halfway down the long driveway when Theodore caught up with her. Isadora, please let me take you home, let me explain. She whirled to face him, and he stopped short at the fury in her eyes. Explain what exactly? How you all thought it would be amusing to invite the poor little librarian to your mansion? How you wanted to see if I'd embarrass myself? How you... It wasn't like that. Then what was it like, Theodore? Because right now, it feels like the cruelest thing anyone has ever done to me. In the distance, she could see the warm lights of the manor, could imagine the guests inside discussing the evening's entertainment. The thought made her sick. You want to know the truth? Theodore's voice was raw. You're right. This started as something else. But Isadora, I swear to you, the moment I saw you tonight, the moment I talked to you, everything changed. I don't believe you. Then let me prove it. But Isadora was already walking away, pulling out her phone to call an Uber, leaving Theodore standing alone in the driveway of his family's mansion, watching the best thing that had ever happened to him disappear into the night. Isadora woke up on Sunday morning with puffy eyes, mascara stains on her pillowcase, and Napoleon sitting on her chest, glaring at her with the judgment only cats could master. Don't look at me like that, she croaked, her voice hoarse from crying. You were right about everything, okay? Happy now? Napoleon meowed once, a sound that clearly meant, I told you so, and jumped off the bed, his tail swishing with feline superiority. The emerald dress lay in a crumpled heap on her bedroom floor, where she'd left it after stumbling in at midnight. Looking at it now made her stomach churn. She kicked it under the bed and pulled on her oldest, most comfortable pajamas, the ones with holes in the knees and a faded unicorn that looked as defeated as she felt. Her phone had been buzzing all morning. 17 missed calls from Cordelia, 12 text messages and 3 voicemails. She couldn't bring herself to listen to them yet. Instead, she made coffee with shaking hands and sat at her tiny kitchen table, staring out at the gray Boston morning and trying to piece together exactly how spectacularly her life had imploded in the span of one evening. The worst part wasn't even the humiliation, though that burned like acid in her chest. The worst part was that for those few hours, she'd actually believed it was real. She'd believed that Theodore Ashworth had seen something special in her, that their connection in the garden had been genuine, that maybe, just maybe, fairy tales could happen to ordinary girls from ordinary families. She'd been an idiot. Her phone rang again, Cordelia's ringtone. This time she answered. Before you say anything, Cordelia's voice came through in a rush, I want you to know that I've already planned 17 different ways to murder Marcus Ashworth, and I'm taking votes on which one would be most satisfying. Despite everything, Isadora felt her lips twitch upward. Cord, I'm serious. I'm thinking something involving fire ants and honey, or maybe we go old school and just slash his tires. You can't slash someone's tires. Watch me. That pretentious trust fund piece of... Cordelia launched into a string of creative insults that would have made a sailor blush. How did you find out? Isadora interrupted. It's all over social media. Apparently several guests posted about the dramatic dinner party last night. The hashtag Manor Meltdown is trending. Isadora's stomach dropped. Oh, God. Don't look at it, Cordelia said quickly. I mean it, Isa. Don't torture yourself. Most people are actually on your side. The consensus seems to be that Marcus is a world-class jerk and Theodore looked like he wanted to crawl into a hole and die. Good. He should feel terrible. Honey, what if he really does? What do you mean? I mean, what if this whole thing backfired on him too? What if he really was falling for you? Isadora closed her eyes, remembering the look on Theodore's face when she'd walked away. The raw pain in his voice when he'd begged her to let him explain. It doesn't matter, she said firmly. Even if his feelings were real, the foundation was still a lie. How could I ever trust him again? Maybe you couldn't, but maybe people can change. Maybe people can realize they've made mistakes and want to fix them. Before Isadora could respond, there was a knock at her door. Her heart jumped, and for one insane moment, she thought it might be Theodore. But when she looked through the peephole, she saw a delivery man holding an enormous bouquet of flowers. Isadora Benedetti? Yes? These are for you. The bouquet was stunning. White roses, baby's breath, and something that looked like it cost more than her monthly grocery budget. The card was small and cream-colored, with Theodore's initials embossed at the top. I know flowers can't undo what happened, but I needed you to know that every moment with you was real. Ta. Flowers from Prince Charming? Cordelia asked, reading over her shoulder. She'd arrived sometime during the flower delivery, armed with coffee, bagels, and what looked like a detailed battle plan written on legal paper. They're beautiful, Isadora admitted, burying her nose in the roses despite herself. But flowers don't change what he did. They don't make the humiliation go away. Cordelia studied her friend's face carefully. You're falling for him. I'm not. Isa, I've known you for 10 years. You get this same look whenever you read the end of Jane Eyre. You're falling for him, and it's terrifying you. Of course it's terrifying me. He played with my feelings like they were a game. Or maybe he's just as confused and scared as you are. Before Isadora could argue, her phone rang. Unknown number. Don't answer it, Cordelia warned. But something made her pick up. Hello? Miss Benedetti? This is Eleanor Ashworth. Isadora nearly dropped the phone. Mrs. Ashworth, Please, dear, let me speak. I owe you an enormous apology. What happened last night was inexcusable, and I want you to know that Marcus will be having a very serious conversation with his father and me. That's very kind of you, but I also want you to know that Theodore left the house at 5 this morning. He's been driving around Boston for hours trying to work up the courage to come see you. Isadora's heart skipped. He has? He's absolutely miserable, dear. I haven't seen him this torn up since, well, ever. I know what Marcus said, and I know how it must have looked, but I've been watching my son all week. The way he talked about you, the way his whole face lit up, that wasn't an act. Mrs. Ashworth, I appreciate you calling, but he's in love with you. The words hung in the air like a bombshell. Isadora sank onto her couch, the phone pressed to her ear, hardly daring to breathe. I know my son, Eleanor continued gently. I've watched him date dozens of women over the years, and I've never seen him look at anyone the way he looked at you last night. Not before Marcus ruined everything, and certainly not after. He looked like a man who'd just lost the most precious thing in his life. Even if that's true, Isadora whispered, how do I know this isn't part of some elaborate game too? Because, my dear, if you knew Theodore the way I do, you'd know that he's never been more terrified of anything in his life than he is of his feelings for you. Rich, powerful men like my son aren't used to feeling vulnerable. They're not used to caring more about someone else's happiness than their own. A soft knock at the door interrupted them. Cordelia went to look through the peephole and turned back with wide eyes. Isa, she whispered. It's him. Isadora's heart hammered against her ribs. Mrs. Ashworth, I have to go. Give him a chance, dear. Not for his sake, but for yours. Some mistakes are worth forgiving if the person making them is willing to spend the rest of their life making up for it. The line went dead, and Isadora stared at the door where Theodore Ashworth stood waiting, probably as terrified as she was. What are you going to do? Cordelia asked softly. Isadora looked at the flowers, thought about Eleanor's words, remembered the way Theodore had looked at her in the garden before everything fell apart. She was probably about to make another mistake, but maybe, just maybe, it would be the kind of mistake worth making. She walked to the door and opened it. Theodore stood in the hallway wearing jeans and a wrinkled button-down shirt, his usually perfect hair disheveled like he'd been running his hands through it for hours. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, and he looked like he hadn't slept in days. He also looked absolutely heartbroken. Hi, he said quietly, his voice rough around the edges. Hi, Isadora managed, her heart doing complicated gymnastics in her chest. They stared at each other for a long moment before Cordelia cleared her throat loudly. I'm going to go walk Napoleon for a very long time. Like an hour, maybe 2. She grabbed the confused cat, who clearly had no interest in going anywhere, and squeezed past Theodore with a look that promised painful death if he hurt her best friend again. "Your friend is terrifying," Theodore said once the door closed behind Cordelia. "She's protective. I don't blame her. I would be too." Another silence stretched between them, heavy with everything unsaid. Finally, Theodore spoke. "Can I come in, please? I know I don't deserve it, but I need to explain." Isadora stepped aside, and he entered her small apartment like he was walking into a church. Carefully, reverently, like he understood he was on sacred ground. "It's not much," she said, suddenly self-conscious about her second-hand furniture and tiny kitchen. "It's perfect," he said, and there was something in his voice that made her believe he meant it. "It's so... you." He was looking at her overflowing bookshelves, the cozy reading nook by the window, the stack of novels on her coffee table. His gaze lingered on a framed photo of her and Cordelia at last year's Halloween party, both dressed as literary characters. "You were Elizabeth Bennet," he said, pointing at the photo. "How did you know?" The Empire waist dress, the knowing smile. "It suits you." He turned to face her fully. "Isadora, about last night." "You don't have to explain," she said quickly. "Your brother made it pretty clear what I was to you people. Entertainment for the evening. Marcus is an ass who doesn't speak for me. But he wasn't wrong, was he? This all started as some kind of joke." Theodore closed his eyes, and when he opened them, she saw pain so raw it took her breath away. "You want the truth? The whole, ugly truth?" "Yes." "Then sit down. Please." They sat on opposite ends of her small sofa, the space between them feeling like an ocean. "It started 3 weeks ago," Theodore began, his voice barely above a whisper. "My mother was pressuring me to bring someone appropriate to my grandmother's birthday party, someone who wasn't a model or an actress or another social climber. I was frustrated, and I mentioned seeing this beautiful woman at the library." Isadora's cheeks heated at the word beautiful, but she stayed silent. "My assistant joked about how different our worlds were, and Marcus made some cruel comment about how someone like you would never belong in our world. And he ran his hands through his hair. God, I was so arrogant. I thought I could prove him wrong. I thought I could invite you to dinner, show you our world, maybe offer you some kind of arrangement for future events." Each word felt like a small knife to her heart, but she forced herself to listen. It was supposed to be simple, businesslike, mutually beneficial. He looked up at her, and she saw tears in his gray eyes. "But then I started thinking about you more. Really thinking about you. I remembered the way you'd recommended that book to Mrs. Henderson, how you'd stood up to that businessman who was yelling at the teenage volunteer. I started going to the library more often, just hoping to see you. You were watching me? Not watching, just hoping. You'd be sitting in that chair by the mystery section, completely absorbed in whatever you were reading, and you'd smile at something, and I'd forget how to breathe." Despite herself, Isadora felt warmth spreading through her chest. "The night before the dinner, I almost called it off," Theodore continued, "because somewhere along the way this stopped being about proving a point to Marcus or finding a date for family events. It became about wanting to know you, really know you. But you didn't call it off." "No, and that's the mistake I'll regret for the rest of my life." Outside it had started to rain, the drops pattering against her windows like nature's percussion section. "What happened last night?" Theodore said, leaning forward, his hands clasped tightly. "When I saw you in that dress, when we talked in the garden. Isadora, that was the most real I've felt in years. Maybe ever. How do I know you're not just saying what you think I want to hear? Because if I were smart, I'd be telling you something that might actually work. I'd be making excuses or trying to minimize what I did. But the truth is, I started this with terrible intentions, and I hurt someone who didn't deserve it, and I hate myself for that." He stood up suddenly, pacing to her window, staring out at the rain. "I've been driving around Boston since 5 this morning trying to figure out how to fix this, and the truth is I can't. I can't undo what I did or take back the way it started. All I can do is tell you that everything changed the moment I really looked at you. When? When you told Marcus about helping that woman start her business. The passion in your voice. The way you lit up talking about changing someone's life. I realized you were everything I'd been looking for without knowing I was looking for it. Isadora felt tears prick her eyes. Theodore, I know I don't deserve forgiveness. I know I probably shouldn't even be here. But I couldn't let you think that any of it was fake. The way I looked at you, the way I felt when we talked, the way my heart stopped when you walked away. That was all real. He turned from the window, and she saw he was crying now, tears tracking down his cheeks. I think I'm falling in love with you, he said quietly. And I know that's probably the worst timing in the history of terrible timing, but I couldn't let another day pass without you knowing that. Isadora sat frozen, her heart hammering so hard she was sure he could hear it across the room. Say something, he whispered. Please. You're right, she said finally. It is terrible timing. His face crumpled, and she realized he'd taken that as rejection. But, she continued, standing up and walking toward him, I think I might be falling in love with you too. And that terrifies me more than anything that happened last night. Hope flickered in his eyes. It does? Because last night hurt, Theodore. It hurt more than anything has ever hurt. Not just because of the humiliation, but because for those few hours I thought I'd found something real, something magical. And then it all came crashing down. I know. I'm so sorry. If we're going to do this, if we're going to try, I need to know that you understand what you're asking of me. You're asking me to trust you with my heart again after you've already broken it once. I know that, and I swear to you, Isadora, I will spend every day proving that you can trust me. I will spend every day trying to be worthy of you. She was standing close enough now to see the flecks of blue in his gray eyes, close enough to catch that woodsy scent that had made her dizzy in the garden. One chance, she said softly. That's all I can give you right now. One chance to show me that the man I met in the garden last night is real. One chance is all I need. And we're starting over, completely over. No more games, no more secrets, no more anything but absolute honesty. Agreed. She held out her hand like she was meeting him for the first time. Hi, I'm Isadora Benedetti. I'm a librarian, I have an opinionated cat, and I believe that everyone deserves a good book and a second chance. He took her hand, his warm and slightly trembling. I'm Theodore Ashworth. I run a company I inherited. I make terrible first impressions. And I think I just met the woman who's going to change my life. Outside, the rain continued to fall, washing the city clean and giving them both a chance to start again. 3 weeks later, Isadora was beginning to think that maybe, just maybe, fairy tales could happen to ordinary librarians after all. You're glowing, Cordelia announced, sliding into the booth across from her at their favorite coffee shop. It's actually disgusting how happy you look. I'm not glowing, Isadora protested, but she couldn't stop the smile that spread across her face as she thought about her morning text from Theodore. Good morning, beautiful. Can't wait to see you tonight. P.S. Napoleon has better taste in books than most literary critics. Right, and I'm the Queen of England. Cordelia stirred sugar into her latte with theatrical precision. So, how's Operation Second Chance going? It's not an operation, we're just taking things slow. Define slow, because from where I'm sitting you've been practically floating on air since he showed up at your door in the rain like some romance novel hero. Isadora laughed, because Cordelia wasn't wrong. The past 3 weeks had been like living in a dream she was afraid to wake up from. Theodore had kept his word about starting over, and he'd been perfect. Not perfect in the intimidating, untouchable way she'd seen in magazines, but perfect in all the ways that actually mattered. He'd taken her to a small bookstore in Cambridge for their first official date, where they'd spent 4 hours browsing and arguing about the merits of different authors. He'd listened with genuine interest when she talked about her work, and he'd made her laugh until her sides hurt with stories about his own awkward teenage years. He's picking me up after work today, Isadora said, unable to keep the excitement out of her voice. He won't tell me where we're going, just that I should dress comfortably. Ooh, mysterious, I like it. Very different from dinner at the Manor of Doom. Don't call it that. Fine. The Manor of Emotional Destruction. Better? Before Isadora could respond, her phone buzzed with a text. Her smile faded as she read it. What is it? Cordelia asked, noticing her expression. It's from Mrs. Henderson. She says there's someone at the library asking questions about me. What kind of questions? She doesn't say. Just that I should be careful. Cordelia's expression turned serious. Isa, what if this is some kind of background check? What if Theodore's family is having you investigated? Theodore wouldn't do that. We agreed on complete honesty. Theodore might not. But what about his charming brother? Or his parents? They're rich, powerful people, and you're dating their heir. The possibility sat in Isadora's stomach like a cold stone. She'd been so happy, so caught up in the romance of it all, that she'd almost forgotten the reality of Theodore's world. I'm probably just being paranoid, she said, but the doubt was already creeping in. When Theodore picked her up that evening, Isadora was quiet, distracted. He noticed immediately. Everything okay? He asked as they walked down the street, his hand warm in hers. Someone was asking questions about me at the library today. Theodore stopped walking. What kind of questions? I don't know. Mrs. Henderson just said I should be careful. She turned to face him. Theodore, you didn't... No, he said immediately. Absolutely not. We agreed on honesty, remember? But she could see something in his expression, a flicker of guilt or maybe just concern. What is it? It's probably nothing, but my grandmother's birthday party is next weekend. The whole family will be there, plus half of Boston society. My mother mentioned you might want to attend. As your girlfriend. As the woman I'm falling in love with. Even 3 weeks later, hearing him say things like that made her heart skip beats. But there was something else in his voice, something that made her nervous. What aren't you telling me? Theodore ran his hand through his hair. A gesture she'd learned meant he was struggling with something. The party will be intense. Lots of press, lots of scrutiny. And Marcus will be there. I can handle Marcus. I know you can. But Isadora, once we go public like this, there's no going back. Every aspect of your life will be examined. Your job, your friends, your family, everything. Are you trying to talk me out of going? No, God, no. I want you there more than anything. I want everyone to know that you're mine and I'm yours. I just want you to understand what you're signing up for. They'd stopped in front of a small park, where fairy lights were strung between the trees like stars. Theodore led her to a bench and pulled her down beside him. There's something else, he said quietly. I had coffee with my father yesterday. He knows about us. And? He's concerned about the difference in our backgrounds, the potential for media attention, the impact on the family reputation. Each word felt like a small cut. He doesn't think I'm good enough for you. He doesn't know you yet. But Isadora, I need you to understand something. Theodore took her hands in his gray eyes intense. I don't care what my father thinks. I don't care what society thinks. I don't care about any of it. The only thing I care about is you. But your family, my family will learn to love you the way I do. Or they'll have to accept that I'm going to love you anyway. And if they don't? If choosing me means losing them? Theodore was quiet for a long moment, and Isadora felt her heart sink. This was it, the moment when reality crashed back in, when the fairy tale ended. Then I guess I'll have to learn to live without them, he said finally. Because I can't learn to live without you. Theodore. I'm serious, Isadora. I know we've only been doing this for 3 weeks, but I've never been more sure of anything in my life. You're it for me. You're my person. Even if it means scandal, bad press, disappointing your family. Especially then. Love isn't supposed to be easy or convenient or socially acceptable. It's supposed to be real. And this, us, is the most real thing I've ever felt. He pulled something from his pocket. A small velvet box that made Isadora's heart stop. Oh my God, Theodore, if you're proposing right now, I might actually faint. He laughed, the sound echoing through the quiet park. Not yet. But soon, if you'll let me. He opened the box to reveal a delicate silver necklace with a small book pendant. I saw this and thought of you. It's not an engagement ring, but it's a promise. A promise that I'm in this for real, for better or worse, for scandal or blessing. With trembling fingers, Isadora touched the little book pendant. It's beautiful. Let me put it on you. She turned, lifting her hair, feeling the cool metal settle against her throat like a gentle weight. When she turned back, Theodore was looking at her like she was the most precious thing in the world. So, he said softly, will you come to the party with me? Will you let me introduce you to Boston society as the woman I love? Isadora thought about Mrs. Henderson's warning, about Theodore's father's concerns, about Marcus's cruel smirk and all the ways this could go wrong. Then she thought about the past 3 weeks, the laughter, the late-night phone calls, the way Theodore looked at her like she hung the moon. She thought about the man who'd shown up at her door in the rain, broken and honest and willing to fight for her. Yes, she said. Yes, I'll come to the party with you. Even knowing it might be a disaster? Especially knowing it might be a disaster. Because you're right. Love isn't supposed to be easy. But it's supposed to be worth fighting for. Theodore kissed her then, soft and sweet under the fairy lights. And Isadora felt like maybe, just maybe, they were strong enough to weather whatever storm was coming. She just hoped she was right. The ballroom at the Boston Harbor Hotel was a glittering testament to old money and older traditions. Crystal chandeliers cast rainbow prisms across the room, where Boston's elite mingled in designer gowns and perfectly tailored tuxedos, celebrating the 85th birthday of Martha Ashworth, the family matriarch. Isadora stood at the entrance beside Theodore, wearing a midnight blue dress that Cordelia had insisted made her look like Grace Kelly, but with better hair, and feeling like she was about to walk into a lion's den wearing a meat suit. Breathe, Theodore murmured, his hand warm on the small of her back. You look absolutely stunning, and I love you. I love you too, she whispered back, the words still feeling new and precious on her tongue. But if this goes badly, I'm blaming you. Fair enough. The moment they stepped into the ballroom, conversations paused like someone had pressed a cosmic mute button. Heads turned, whispers began, and Isadora felt the weight of 100 curious stares. Theodore, darling. A woman who could only be Martha Ashworth approached them, moving with the regal bearing of someone accustomed to being the most important person in any room. At 85, she was still striking, with silver hair swept into an elegant chignon and eyes that missed nothing. Grandmother, Theodore said, kissing her cheek. Happy birthday. I'd like you to meet Isadora Benedetti. Martha's keen gaze swept over Isadora from head to toe, and for a moment, time seemed suspended. Then the older woman smiled, not the polite society smile Isadora had been expecting, but something warm and genuine. So you're the young woman who's turned my grandson's world upside down, Martha said, extending her hand. Eleanor has told me wonderful things about you. It's an honor to meet you, Mrs. Ashworth. Theodore speaks of you constantly. All terrible things, I'm sure. Martha's eyes twinkled with mischief. Now, Theodore, don't monopolize this lovely creature all evening. I want to introduce her around. Before either of them could protest, Martha had linked arms with Isadora and was steering her toward a group of elegantly dressed women. Ladies, I'd like you to meet Isadora Benedetti, Theodore's young lady. Isadora, these are some of Boston's finest women, and biggest gossips, so mind what you say. The women laughed, and Isadora found herself immediately drawn into conversation about books, charity work, and travel. To her surprise, she was actually enjoying herself. From across the room, she caught Theodore's eye and smiled. He was deep in conversation with his father and several business associates, but his gaze kept finding her like a compass needle finding north. That's when Marcus appeared at her elbow. Well, well, the little librarian cleans up nicely, he said, his tone just shy of insulting. I'm surprised you came back for more after our last encounter. I'm full of surprises, Isadora replied evenly, not letting him rattle her. I'm sure you are. Tell me, what's your endgame here? Theodore's money? His connections? Or are you just enjoying your 15 minutes of fame? The women around them had gone quiet, sensing drama. Isadora felt heat rise in her cheeks. But before she could respond, a clear voice cut through the tension. Marcus Ashworth, you are a rude, small-minded little man, and you're embarrassing the family name. Everyone turned to see Martha approaching, her expression thunderous despite her diminutive size. Grandmother, You were just being the disappointment you've always been. Martha's voice could have cut glass. This young woman has more class and grace in her little finger than you've managed in 32 years of life. But she's a woman who builds people up instead of tearing them down. She's a woman who contributes something meaningful to the world. And she's a woman who makes your brother happy in a way I've never seen before. Martha stepped closer to Marcus, her voice dropping to a deadly whisper. If you say one more unkind word to her, I will make sure you regret it for the rest of your very comfortable, very dependent life. Do I make myself clear? Marcus's face had gone pale. Yes, grandmother. Good. Now apologize to Isadora and remove yourself from my sight. I apologize, Marcus mumbled, then fled toward the bar like his pants were on fire. Martha turned back to Isadora with a smile. Now, where were we? The rest of the evening passed in a blur of introductions, conversations, and growing confidence. Isadora found herself laughing with Boston socialites, discussing library funding with a city councilman, and even sharing book recommendations with a federal judge. As the evening wound down, Theodore found her on the hotel's terrace, where she was getting some air and watching the harbor lights sparkle on the water. How are you holding up? He asked, slipping his arms around her from behind. Better than I expected. Your grandmother is incredible. She likes you, really likes you. She told me earlier that you're the best thing that's ever happened to me. Smart woman. The smartest. Theodore turned her in his arms, his expression suddenly serious. Isadora, there's something I need to tell you. Her heart skipped. What? The person who was asking questions about you at the library? It was a private investigator my father hired. Isadora's stomach dropped. Theodore. Wait, let me finish. He found out about it today and fired the investigator immediately. Then he came to find me. Theodore's hands framed her face gently. He wanted to apologize. He said watching you tonight, seeing how you handled Marcus, how you charmed everyone in the room while staying completely yourself, he realized he was wrong about you. Really? Really. He asked me to tell you that you're welcome in the family anytime. Theodore's smile was soft and full of love. Actually, he asked me when I was planning to make it official. Official? Theodore dropped to one knee so suddenly that Isadora gasped. Around them, other guests began to notice, forming a small crowd on the terrace. Isadora Benedetti, he said, pulling out a ring box that definitely hadn't been there earlier. I know we said we were taking things slow, but I can't wait another day to ask you this. Theodore, oh my God. You've changed everything for me. You've made me want to be better, to do better, to love better. You've shown me what real happiness looks like. His voice was shaking with emotion. Will you marry me? Will you let me spend the rest of my life proving that I'm worthy of you? The ring was perfect, a classic solitaire that caught the harbor lights and threw them back like captured stars. But Isadora barely saw it because she was too busy looking at the man she loved, kneeling in front of her with his heart in his eyes. Yes, she whispered, then louder. Yes, of course. Yes. The terrace erupted in applause as Theodore slipped the ring onto her finger and stood to kiss her. Over his shoulder, Isadora could see Martha clapping with obvious delight, Eleanor wiping away tears, and even William Ashworth smiling broadly. I love you, Theodore murmured against her lips. I love you too, even if you are completely insane for proposing in front of all these people. Had to make sure you couldn't say no. I would never say no to you, not anymore. 1 year later, The Boston Public Library's annual fundraising gala was in full swing, and Isadora Ashworth, she still got a thrill every time she thought her new name, stood at the podium in a room filled with the city's most influential citizens. "When I started working here 5 years ago," she said into the microphone, "I never imagined I'd be standing here today, announcing the largest donation in the library's history." She looked out at the crowd, her eyes finding Theodore at a front table, watching her with the same adoring expression he'd worn at their wedding 6 months ago. The Ashworth Foundation's $10 million gift will ensure that every child in Boston has access to books, computers, and educational programs, regardless of their family's circumstances. Because every person deserves the chance to discover the magic of a good story. The applause was thunderous, but Isadora was only looking at one person. Her husband, her partner, her best friend, who had turned a cruel joke into the greatest love story of her life. Later, as they walked home through the Boston Common, Theodore stopped beneath the same tree where he'd given her the necklace she still wore every day. "Any regrets, Mrs. Ashworth?" "Just one," she said solemnly. "What's that?" "I wish I could go back and thank whoever sent that invitation. Because whoever it was, they gave me everything I never knew I wanted." "Actually," Theodore said, looking slightly embarrassed, "I should probably confess something." "What now?" "The invitation? That beautiful calligraphy? The gold wax seal?" "Yes? That was all my mother. She overheard Marcus and me talking about you, did some investigating of her own, and decided to take matters into her own hands." Isadora stared at him. "Your mother set this whole thing up? Apparently she'd been watching you at the library, too. She said you reminded her of herself at your age. Passionate, intelligent, kind. She thought we'd be perfect for each other. So your mother played matchmaker by having you unknowingly invite me to dinner so I could be humiliated by your brother? When you put it like that, it sounds like a terrible plan." Isadora started laughing, the kind of deep, helpless laughter that made her sides hurt. "Your family is completely insane." "I know, is that a problem? Are you kidding? I love your crazy family, especially your matchmaking mother and your terrifying grandmother. What about your devastatingly handsome husband?" "Him too," she said, standing on her tiptoes to kiss him. "But don't let it go to your head." As they walked home together through the city where their love story had begun, Isadora thought about fairy tales and second chances, about the magic of unexpected invitations and the power of choosing love over fear. Sometimes the best stories were the ones that started with someone else's cruel joke and ended with your own beautiful truth. And sometimes, if you were very lucky, the prince turned out to be even better than the fairy tale promised.